back to Masters of Modern, the MMcast podcast. I'm your host, Alex Kessler, here at our new times on Tuesday nights, or Tuesday mornings, Tuesday days, here with our wonderful co-host, guesting in Ben's honor, Nikachu. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Alex. Yes, I'm Nikachu, Merfolk Master. Also, something of a modern analyst. You know, this is what I'm more known for now than Merfolk these days. Most people are like, I don't even play Merfolk. I just want to hear what I want to say about Modern.
In a similar position of pigeonholing to only being able to talk about Modern, and when I explore outside, it always runs into barriers. I sympathize, but
yes,
now you get to talk about Modern again.
Excellent. To an audience that wants to hear all about Modern, yeah, you're in the right place. We're going to talk about Modern on the Modern Cat. Masters of Modern Chat. There we go.
So really quickly for everyone, and then we'll get into small amounts of ads. Please just let our audience know whom you are. Where you come from?
I'm Nikachu, the Merfolk Master. Basically, I started a YouTube channel about Merfolk because everyone in the Merfolk forums, they didn't know how to play Merfolk, and I was like, well, this is ridiculous. I know how to win with this deck. It's not a foolish deck, and I basically built a channel around it and then grew it from there because a lot of people, they just want to learn about Modern, and I like the analytical approach to Merfolk. And I would say I have a bit of a unique perspective because I'm playing a very underpowered deck. I mean, this deck, Merfolk has no power. I'm not going to say like it has anything close to what Amulet Titan does or any busted combo deck. So if I want to win, I got to really know the metagame, and I got to grind for my victories. So I have a unique perspective, I think, from all the other players that are like, oh, how could they make this banning, this and that? Like, I come from very humble position in the metagame, and, I've stuck to it. And I still had success. Hey, I make day twos, one top 8 of a GP. But I got it. And I can still make the deck relevant on, like, Modern challenges and stuff like that.
Well, and that's something that the podcast always adheres to, which is it's better often to master a deck than it is necessarily to play whatever the most recent hotness or the best deck in the metagame, because a player who's just picking up, if a player has the best deck and then they are as experienced as the person who's playing not the best deck, then they probably might win. But often that's not possible because the metagame shifts so much, and that person who's just going to be able to be like, oh, this new deck's the greatest deck in the format right now, I can learn that matchup really easily, versus, how am I, Amulet Titan player, going to learn every single Modern deck matchup in and out and be able to beat Merfolk of all things, which a lot of people especially don't test against because its reputation isn't as good as its performance often dictates. So that's definitely something that is good to hear.
Absolutely. Although I have to admit, the Merfolk community themselves, they like the idea of being under the radar. For the most part, Modern is a removal heavy format. So, I mean, a lot of the cards just built into every deck will interact quite favorably with Merfolk. But, we still got those tricks up our sleeve. If you forgot what Harbinger of the Tides does, then maybe that'll be the one turn that it blows you out.
Well, it's
one less attack step.
It's not necessarily like Lantern Control, right? Where people
yeah, that's right.
Like, oh, if you're not playing hardcore artifact removal, no cards interact with this deck.
Yeah.
Good luck. So yeah, it's you got to find your windows, but So really quickly, first off, if you're, this podcast is bought by our patrons, we did a whole pre-show, about 15 minutes of content purely about Squid Game. So if you want to hear our thoughts on Squid Game, it was Nikachu's first time getting to talk with it about into the world at large. So you were hyped.
Oh yeah, I was excited. So I mean, if you love Squid Game, you got to make that the most popular patron post ever. You get those views up.
That's true. Then we might just start a Squid Game podcast for season 2.
Maybe. Oh man, there was big views on Squid Game.
Oh yeah, I bet.
There's opportunities there.
And then also this, we have an affiliate code with TCG Player. So if you see that link below, and you want to buy some Magic cards, maybe some Merfolk cards, because we're going to be talking about that today, click on that link, and that helps the podcast out. They know we sent you. And then the last kind of big shout out is we have a whole new schedule out, and there maybe Rick, who does all of our editing, will post it in front of the screen as I talk about it. But basically, the podcast now releases every Tuesday. It's been on Mondays, but we moved it forward partially because we realized that we were just like putting a bunch of content content on the internet all at once and wanted to spread it out. Mondays, we'll still do the Commander stream at nights, but we are now doing modern gameplay content every Sunday afternoon. We're live streaming it, and then it will live on the YouTube channel from that point onwards. Ben's kind of hosting that. He'll be hosting that. I'll be doing some of the Commander stuff, and we'll both guest on the other one when we get a chance. But that's a whole new thing where it's called Masters of Modern Gauntlet, and we'll have guests and they'll play against Ben and get to talk about the deck that they're the best at. And so definitely make sure to check that out. The first one aired last Sunday. It was me and Ben. I don't know what deck I'm going to play, so retroactively I'm playing a sweet deck that's dope, and I did really well with it, and you should watch it to find out how wrong I am. Are you a small business owner, or are you thinking about becoming one? Does the legal side of things like incorporating and contracts seem daunting? Do you just wish you could ask an attorney for help without paying huge hourly rates? I know when I started my business, it was really daunting about all the different issues that were facing me on this side, and having someone to go to and talk to, or someone that I would know that would know what they were talking about, would have been really helpful. And we are excited to tell you about a big opportunity to do just that coming up in December. Attorney Andrea Sager, a small business specialist and the founder of thelegalpreneur.com, is hosting a comprehensive 5-day challenge for a flat fee of $19. Just $19. What is the 5-day Legalpreneur Challenge? It is an opportunity for our community of small business entrepreneurs to get legally protected and prepared for exponential growth in a new year for only $19. December 6th through 10th is a challenge week featuring one legal training video sent each morning, one live support call each afternoon, one downloadable guide for each evening, and a community to support you through the legal anxieties that all entrepreneurs face. This is a group of people that you have access to that I wish I had when I was starting my business, and this is a great way of getting access to that for only $19. Each day, the challenge will target the most intimidating areas of the law that are often overlooked by small business entrepreneurs. Daily topics include entity formation, contracts, trademarks, copyrights, and creating an annual legal review checklist. And 5 free downloadable guides are included. Challenge Week is also supplemented by a 5-day Legalpreneur Challenge course that organizes all of the content in one place, forever accessible by Challenge Week participants. So even if you go through this whole process and you need to be able to get access to this afterwards, there's a easy to go to location to find it. All of this for the one-time price of $19. And when you use our affiliate link at thecontractvault.com/ref/the MMcast, labeled somewhere around my head, or by clicking the link in the description to this episode, your help support this show, and we super appreciate it. Get your business handled. Thanks so much for checking this out, and enjoy the episode. And then the last thing is, and maybe said this last thing, this is the actual last thing. So we do a little game every episode. It's a trivia game. And I now that we've had guests on for the last few weeks, have put the onus on the guests to come up with trivia to try and stump me. So far, I keep getting stumped, so we'll do it. But the way this works is Nikachu is going to ask me a trivia question. I'm going to him and ha. You all have to try and answer it, and you're making a bet with us. If you know the answer, or you think you know the answer, comment it below. And then if you get it right, you win. We appreciate it. If you want to hit that like button, great. But if you get it wrong, you have to hit like, you have to hit subscribe. You're obligated to do it. That's the deal you made just by listening to me say it. Sorry, you should have not listened for that hot 10 seconds. But now you're into it. It's a Squid Game. It's you either do what I just said, or you're not going to die. That's terrifying. But all right, let's hear the trivia question real quick.
Oh, you want to get into the trivia?
Oh yeah, it's trivia time.
All right. I'm not a master of Jeopardy. I'm not a master of giving questions, but I do got something from the Merfolk community. Which Merfolk staple cannot be found with the correct oracle text non-foil? Which Merfolk staple cannot be found in the correct oracle text non-foil?
Huh. Okay, so I don't think anything was, because I do know that like recent sets, sometimes the foil are different, but even the new Val staples that there's all these mistakes on, I don't think there was a difference. So this feels like it's like a 10th edition issue, because like the errata is wrong. Or like the rules clarification on 10th edition aren't on the foils. It's kind of like how like end the turn and time stop 10th edition foil doesn't have the explanation of what ending the turn means. It just says end the turn on it. So was it in 10th edition?
I'm impressed how you're at least how you're trying to reverse engineer the answer.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think.
No,
Is there
it's
like
not bad at all.
So like I guess the like is Island Walk? Did they change how Island Walk works? And is 10th edition the only version of Lord of Atlantis that doesn't say what it does? Like does that can't be true. There has to be a Lord of Atlantis before that says Island Walk. Is there another Merfolk staple that's only from 10th edition? It's not. Choke is bad for Merfolk.
Choke is bad for Merfolk.
You don't play Choke in
the
Merfolk.
Anti-Merfolk staple. Well, some people have tried. I've seen it. Just load up your deck with non-islands and boom, throw the Choke out there.
Just get them. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna guess Lord of Atlantis. Just swinging in the 10th edition foil world.
You got the right answer, but I guess for the wrong reason.
Oh, don't. Okay.
The reason is Lord of Atlantis. I mean, originally in Alpha, it wasn't called a Merfolk; it was a Lord.
Oh.
Sorry. In Alpha, it was actually called Lord of Atlantis. That was the creature type, but eventually it got turned. The creature type was turned into Lord, it still gave all other. No, it said I think all Merfolk get +1/+1 in Island Walk, but it didn't include itself because it was a Lord. It wasn't a Merfolk.
Sure.
Now at the point of, I believe, Time Spiral, maybe earlier, Time Spiral Lord of Atlantis is called Merfolk Lord. And at some point, they errated it to just say Merfolk. It's not a Lord anymore.
Sure, they got rid of the Lord.
But the problem is the newest version of Lord of Atlantis that has correct errata was a foil judge promo. That's why I specifically said that you can't find a non-foil Lord of Atlantis with the correct Oracle text, because the only one with the correct Oracle text is in foil.
So because the Time Spiral, because it says Merfolk Lord on Time Spiral.
That old archaic.
Oh, so it's just there's only one printing of Lord of Atlantis that doesn't say Lord on it.
Correct. The
Wild.
correct Oracle text.
What about
been errated a million times?
Yeah. All Merfolk get +1 have Island Walk. Oh, because it's Lord of Atlantis from 7th edition is just Lord.
It's just Lord, so it doesn't buff itself because it's not a Merfolk, it's a Lord.
Oh. Okay, well I got the right card,
rule.
So
you got the right card. It wasn't bad. Like I was impressed. I was impressed how you're doing your detective work.
Yeah, I walked my way into the wrong reasons. I've never. It's better to be lucky than it's better to be lucky and right than dumb and wrong, or whatever the saying is.
What can I say? I mean, like you walked yourself backwards to 10th edition, where probably there were some old Merfolk cards that are staples today that could have gone through any errata change. There you go, Lord of Atlantis. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
maybe I made the question too easy.
I was thinking, oh no, that was really hard. I got that purely by luck. I knew that there was, because it was possible it was something from the last year and a half, right? Because of all the different printing ways things are being printed, cards that are printed in like the Commander Precon might have a different ruling on it than cards printed in collector boosters, which will be different than draft boosters. Maybe there's like a weird card that was printed in the Mystical Archive that's a Merfolk staple that happens to have the correct ruling for the first time, and the last time it was printed was like 30 years ago. So that there was definite weird, and I was also afraid that if you were going to ask me which cards we're seeing heavy play in Merfolk that were printed since 2019, I don't know if I could tell you which one. So it could have been just a weird new card, or a modern, the dock hand, right? For the
dock hand, Tide Shaper, Sveloon.
Right. Any of those could just have a weird problem with their printing that had to be rotted. I also thought really hard, is there a companion? But then they don't have it. There's no printing of companions that are correctly errated yet. Though people have been asking for a secret layer that has all of the correct printing for them. I also wouldn't mind
pay 3 to put into your hand.
Yep. So yeah, so that's Magic Trivia. So thank you everyone who got it wrong and had to hit that subscribe and like button. We appreciate you a great deal. If you got it right, congratulations. You're smarter than me because you probably knew why that was the answer. And then, please, we appreciate that subscribe and like. That's always a nice experience. We do modern content here every week and a bunch of other content now. So now we're past trivia. Let's talk. So So what got you into Modern? Why did you start playing Modern? What is your history into Magic? What motivated you to become this Merfolk expert in this world of Modern Magic?
Super long story short, I mean, maybe around 2012, 2000, maybe 2013, I was getting burnt out in chess. I was playing it. Like I played Magic on and off in my life a lot of times. And then at some point, an old high school friend says, "Hey, you played Magic in high school. Can you play with us?" We just got into Magic, and I'm like, "Sure, let's play a little bit." And then I got the bug back, and I'm like, I don't want to play chess right now. You know what? I'm really hungry to play like a lot of Magic at the moment. So I started, and then I decided, you know what? This is like the fourth time I'm coming back to Magic. I should just permanently stick to this, to somewhat semi-permanently stick to this game and actually get good at it. So I started to associate myself with pro tour competitors, or people who are just at least very serious about the game. I was binging FNMs. But one thing I did love in my earliest days, like in high school, is I loved extended. I loved those non-rotating formats. And standard is fine and all that, but that was the point. Like I was getting back into the game in standard, but what I really wanted to do was play the non-rotating format, Legacy, Modern. So I mean, that's basically how I moved. It was just a natural thing. It was just a matter of time that I moved into Modern.
The normal. Oh, my cards keep rotating. Why? Please, something
Yeah.
stable. Sweet. And then what brought you to Merfolk? Why did you latch on to? I mean, the fish deck of all things.
Yeah. The funny thing is, actually, my journey into Modern was delayed maybe by a year, because the moment I wanted to dump Standard was the moment that Theros got printed, and a beautiful mono blue devotion deck was tier 1 in Standard, and it was exactly the type of deck I want to play. I love these blue decks, creatures. It's exactly the type of style I want to play. So I played like every Standard event I could possibly play in the city with this mono blue deck. I got my fill until rotation. But then when I was moving to Modern, I mean, initially I played Bogles. I got murdered. I was very new to Modern. I didn't know I'm supposed to side in Dismember and Path to Exile for every matchup, because Spellskite is being sided in against me in every matchup. You have Spellskite too? You have Spellskite too? You have Spellskite too? I mean, I don't actually think Bogles is a very good... I mean, unless you have a sideboard guide, I don't think Bogles is a very good beginner deck into Modern, just because there are just really painfully awful sideboard cards against you. And I lost 20 games straight. So I said, well, to hell with this deck. I'm not going to play this deck. I'm going to play something else. And then I found out, well, there's Merfolk, and it looks so, and it's so similar to mono blue devotion in Standard. I'm just upgrading the creatures more or less. And
I mean, at that point, you were playing Master of Waves in both decks anyways. So you're kind of your main win condition.
Mage.
Yeah.
No, I replaced Judges familiar with Curse Catcher. And so what ended up happening, with a little bit of advice from a pro tour player, Petr Sahurik, who was winning on the pro tour with Merfolk, I top 8'd 2 PTQs in a row, one with about 80-ish people and another one 175-ish people. So, and I was like, I'm on top of the world. This is the best deck in Modern. And so, I mean, I've been dedicated ever since.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's you kind of came in the right moment. That's also, I think, the era where it won most of its GPs. So it was in a moment to pick up. And
well, I got into it before it got big, because my influence. Well, I don't know about the 2016 one, but I know the 2015 one. The guy was playing my list just off by 2 cards. He asked me, "Hey, what?" Because I was already the authority at that time, where I'm the dedicated person to Merfolk, and the guy, his name was Przemek Notsinski, he asked me, "Okay, what's your list? What are you doing?" I said, "I got a list. I got a list for you." And he switched 2 cards, and I made 21st place in that event, in that GP. Didn't get credit because the decks were so similar. They just didn't publish anything that looked like a double. But he won first place, and we talked about all the matchups in the top 8. Okay, you're going up against Scapeshift, or you actually have to bring in Kira for this combo matchup because it plays more like a control deck. You gotta keep the creatures on the battlefield. So he won, and then, but I would say I had a big influence on the Merfolk community, at least at a competitive level.
And so what were the 2 cards that were different? Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't remember what he took out. But he brought in 2 Hibernation in the sideboard.
Okay.
For the Coco, what was that called at the time? The Podless Pod, basically.
Okay, yeah. Collected Company, Malira combo.
There you go. Yeah.
And so, all right, let's just the next part of the thing in my notes is talking about Merfolk anyways. So history of Merfolk, kind of has been around basically since the format has existed, between both copies of Lord of Atlantis, Master Waves being printed in Theros, a lot of the staples, because it was a legacy deck for a long time that was doing really well, and most of the cards, kind of similar to Affinity, did the same thing, were pretty easily able to port into Modern without too many pain points, and like the main cards you were missing like were Force of Will, but the mana was way worse, and so just being able to punish people with not Overgrown Seas.
Oh, Spreading Seas.
Spreading Seas, thank you. There's a C in here. There's a lot of C's. We're talking about Merfolk. And so the deck, a combination of mana denial, resource denial, and just aggressive threats that get around islands, because I always put in a position where it kind of can capitalize on that. In modern times, the post-Modern Horizons 1 world, it hasn't probably performed as strongly, even though it hasn't had anything taken out of the deck. Where do you see Merfolk now, and what are its strengths, what are its weaknesses, why would someone play it at the moment, etc.?
Well, I actually look at the deck very similarly like it was back in 2017, because its popularity just collapsed with the rise of like Bant Eldrazi. I don't know what it was, but a lot of people said, well, there's a new tribal deck in the format. Why would anyone play Merfolk? And then Humans comes up. Why would anyone play Merfolk? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it has... why play it? I mean, basically, it has a pretty good control matchup. Like, it has a really good control matchup for the most part. We have natural island walk. We have counter magic. We can play at flash speed pretty effectively. We get around, like, Ether Vial and Cavern of Souls, neuter like a huge chunk of their deck. They can't counterspell anything. There's so many games. I play Cavern of Souls. I just place cards, and my opponent just doesn't do anything. They just make land drop, and then they just concede. It's because they had a handful of counter magic. So you would want to play it. Well, you'd if you like to win on hard mode, because that's really what Merfolk is all about. Like I said, this is a deck with no power. There's no power in this deck whatsoever. It's on the same realm of like Death and Taxes. You have to earn your victories playing creatures, turning them sideways, hoping the creatures don't die, don't get blocked, don't get countered, nothing. You deal damage, and you have to rinse and repeat this process over and over again until your opponent concedes. So with that in mind, you have to play very accurately. It's not a forgiving deck at all. You make a big mistake, you probably blew the match. I mean, that's just how it is. So you really need to know the deck. But otherwise, it's funny. It just has enough trickiness to it, and the fact that it's so adaptable. Like, I don't want to call this too much of a toolbox deck, but there is a wide range of ways you can customize the deck. Its advantages are when the metagame is narrow. Usually, you can build a very effective deck against that metagame. And the more wide the metagame is, the more screwed my Merfolk deck is. So against a very diverse metagame, I'm highly disadvantaged. Against a very narrow metagame, I'm very advantaged. I can play very focused spells versus whether you're big mana strategies, control, aggro, whatever. But if it's all over the place, I'm going to hedge too much against one archetype or another. I'm not going to get the right matchups, and then it just flops.
So with Modern Horizons 2, the metagame shifted pretty heavily, right? I mean, this year, last 2 years,
biggest shift maybe in the history of Modern.
Right. Like the last 2 years have been a relatively tumultuous metagame, partially because, before Modern Horizons 2, there was Modern Horizons 1 plus War of Spark into maybe the most powerful year of Magic since Urza's Saga, and then that kind of continuing the rotation. A lot of those ended up being more like specific pain point banning problems, where you have companions, which weren't banned but were errated. You had Hogak, you had Oko, you had Once Upon a Time, you had and then you go into the era of snow, landfall, etc. But then Modern Horizons 2 came out, kind of totally reset the metagame, but then the metagame has actually been pretty stable since then. Does Merfolk, is kind of the world of what the metagame looks like at the moment a friendly place for Merfolk? Is it something that you maybe would take to the Magic Fest tournament that's happening this weekend? Would this maybe not be the best tournament for that due to what decks are most popular?
I would 100% bring Merfolk to the event, but I would say I am I'm in a very comfortable position with Merfolk. I wouldn't say this metagame is hostile. It's never good. Like I said, you're always working for your victories. But I've seen way worse metagames. Like whenever I see a bad matchup, I'm just like, well, this is not Lantern Control, because Lantern Control was an atrocious matchup. It was a 5%er if my opponent was really bad. Like, and if my opponent was good, then it was like a 0%er. It was like the worst matchup I can think of in the history I've ever played in Modern. Right now, I would say I am not comfortable against any Solitude plus Fury plus Omnath matchup, although maybe it can be shored up with Solitude. Like, Solitude is some new tech showing up in the Merfolk deck. I want to give credit to the guy who made it. Something named Tulio. But this guy is making some pretty consistent 5-0s with Merfolk.
If you ship me
Tulio Jaudy.
Okay.
So Tulio Jaudy is 2 big innovations, adding Subtlety and Archmage's Charm in the main, sacrificing Mutavault for it. But I do like the idea, because one thing I didn't like about Lurrus as a companion is that it deprived me of grinding out decks threat-wise. Like, the traditional way, say, a Merfolk deck beat Jund is that I have more threats than you have answers for. And if you deplete my hand, my Spreading Seizes and my Silvergill Adepts and my Mutavaults outnumbered whatever you had in your own deck. Mm-hmm. So I am less likely to flood out than you. And if you want to play this grind out game with me, you'll lose. Not anymore with Lurrus. So if they have Lurrus in their deck, I will always lose on card advantage 100% of the time. I cannot win the long game so long as Lurrus exists as a companion, because we'll exchange all resources, we're empty-handed. Then they grab Lurrus, they play Lurrus, they get a Tarmogoyf back, and then if I don't immediately kill the Lurrus, it like cascades out of control really quickly. So now I learned that killing things are really bad right now against a Lurrus deck. If you try to burn everything down, destroy everything, that's probably not an ideal optimal strategy versus a Lurrus deck. So this whole idea of Archmage's Charm, of stealing something from them, not necessarily putting it into the graveyard, to bounce it on top of their library with Subtlety, because when Subtlety enters the battlefield, you return target creature or planeswalker spell and put it on top of their deck. This is hitting at an angle that I like in Modern. And anyway, it's a new innovation. That's just the magic of the Merfolk deck, finding new tools to interact at the right moment of the metagame.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of... I mean, with Subtlety, you're fighting fire a little bit with fire, which is always a strategy that works. And then
fighting fire with water.
Yeah. Well, light. What is? I guess Fury is fire. We'll take fire.
Yeah, Fury is fire. There we go.
But then and then Archmage Charm is also tech that, like, that's also just like a very versatile tool that can, in the matchups it's bad, always is able to kind of just draw you cards to get to something that maybe is more useful, and then being at instant speed as you play other specs that you have. So I'm gonna go through some of the like top decks and maybe talk about like what strategies you would implement to try and beat it, or if this is just a matchup that's bad and hopefully you dodge it. So the first one is what I think a lot of people are pointing at for the challenge this weekend and next week as maybe the best deck in the format, and that's Hammer Time.
So I mean, I built my entire deck around Hammer Time. Currently, like, almost every card is meant for Hammer Time. I play Merfolk Trickster to tap things down. I play Harbinger of the Tides to bounce them back to their hand. I'm playing Brazen Bower to either bounce creatures or bounce the hammer back to their hand. So I'm very, very, very much have this deck on my radar, because if I don't beat this deck, I'm completely ruined. And I would say, I can say confidently, because I do like to segregate players into 2 categories, like the pros and then the casual players, because there's a very big difference between, a pro playing Hammer Time versus the casual player. The casual player, I think I have a big edge versus against Hammer Time. Because Hammer Time is a very complicated, difficult deck to play. It's almost like Affinity. If you just go all in, you might walk right into a blowout. Whereas if you chip away, wait for your opponent to tap out, then you slam them with the cranial plating, and boom, it's all over. And a very similar situation can happen with Hammer Time. If you're just going to play the hammer into open mana and you have no backup plan after that, then maybe you wasted your opportunity, because you can't, like, Sigarda's, because you play hammer equipped with Sigarda's Aid, But then if you have no way of backing that up later, then well, you might not draw anything for a few turns, and that's my opportunity to win. Against good players, I don't know. I'm going to guess I'm around like less than 50-50. Maybe I'm 45-55. Maybe I'm way worse than that. But, I always have a chance. So anyway, I think I'm pretty comfortable with my Hammer Time matchup. I can't say objectively how good I am against the pro players. Maybe I have an edge because I have so many tempo cards. But I'm going to guess not, because if they win the die roll, they're probably favored in the match overall. And I can only win the die roll like 50% of the time. So like the deck has enough speed that there's going to be some hands I just have no chance of interacting with.
Sure. And sometimes the benefit with the pro player too is that, like, if you're trying to play Magic in a pro capacity, you're having to pay attention to so many different formats that, like, even if you've tested Hammer Time a bunch, and like, pro players are just very good. Like,
well, I would say when I say pro, I mean like the modern specialist.
Okay.
I'm more concerned about the because you're right, because the pro players, there's a huge section of pro players that just hate modern because their time is divided. They honestly can't pay so much attention to modern, but the people who love modern dedicated, the aspiring spikes, the doom wakes, the canisters.
Sure.
They're those are the people I fear, because I do keep them in mind, because I want to win the tournament. Like I want to go. If I go to a GP, I always do it with the intention of winning the tournament. So I have to have plans, hopefully, for worst case scenario. Best deck in the format, played by the best player. What's my matchup like?
Right. Murktide Regent.
I think this is very close, but I think I'm favorable. I think I'm favorable in this matchup. They play Murktide. I can bounce it with Harbinger of the Tides or Brazen Bower. That's the whole idea, is just completely deprive them of their resources. I think I can keep their graveyard low with the Ragavan. I have enough tempo moves that I can eke out a victory. And I think one card that, at least very important to me to winning this matchup, is Kira Great Glass Spinner. I think if my creatures aren't removed, they will not beat me. So, I mean, if they spend too many resources or too much mana killing my creatures, I will come out on top. It's a close matchup, though, because if they play a Murktide, it can get really big really fast if they play a follow-up Murktide to buff up the original Murktide. So you do have to be careful with your life total, and it's a real tightrope. But I'd be very happy to play against this deck all tournament.
All right. We kind of talked about control, but if you want to kind of jump into control really quick, as a brief one.
I will just say I would prefer not to play against the Yorion one with a lot of walls. Wall of Omens is very frustrating because it forces me to commit more creatures to the board than I want to, walking into a Supreme Verdict that I don't want to. So that's all. And they operate with more card advantage. I think they have less dead cards in the matchup, and they play Spreading Seas that can hit my Mutavault. So non-Yorion version, I'd like to play it all tournament. The Blink one, a lot closer. I still think I'm favored, but it's way closer. It's way closer than for comfort.
You'd rather see Kihiras than Yorions.
That's right. There, I want to see. Yeah, that's right. You got it.
So I guess that's one question, and we can be here. Like, jumping in against the deck, how helpful is the early information on which companion they might be playing with, or if they're playing a companion in for keeping your hand or walking into that matchup?
I think overall, if I'm up against Aluris, I will try not to mulligan. I'll maybe keep a little bit of slightly. I don't want to be too greedy, because London Mulligan is really nice. Like I don't like keeping so many sketchy hands anymore. But when I see Luris, I'm thinking like Death Shadow. I'm thinking Jund. I'm thinking like Rakdos. Like I'm thinking Inquisition and Thoughtseize. So the more I mulligan against those decks, the more ruined I am. The only time that this doesn't work is if I'm up against Hammer Time. And
then Kihira versus Yorion versus.
Well, Yorion, I just can't do my. I mean, yeah. I will assume if I see a Yorion, it's like some sort of control deck.
Sure.
Maybe with Solitudes, Furies, or maybe it's the Blink one. But they'll play. Well, I won't say they play similarly, but I don't think my mulligan decisions would change very much. If I see Kihira, I'll just assume it's. Well, I guess it could be Elementals. There could be Elementals, but for the most part, I think the only companion that will change my 7-card keep would be just Luris.
Okay. Now moving into this is a little bit of a library of cards, but the Cascade decks, Crashing Footballs, Living End, etc. etc.
I'm surprisingly a big dog. Like, these games are so close, but I keep losing. And I don't know if it's like 50-50 and I'm on the low side of variance. But truth be told, they've adapted their deck to deal with early game interaction so well because they have to respect Ragavan and Dragon Rage Chandler. They have to kill these things really early on. So decks are more incentivized to make sure they have early game interaction. And this crashing footfall, this specifically crashing footfalls, it on paper to me this looks like a deck I would beat because it has islands and I just need to interact a little bit. But in practice, they're more or less killing my thing on turn 1, killing my thing on turn 2, put 2/8/8 rhinos in play, and they're still tempoing me out while I could turn the corner if I can get enough stuff to stick, but I just can't. And so that's my problem against this deck. I want to say in theory there is some solution to crushing this thing, but at the moment, like my records say, I'm losing, so I have to figure something out for GP Vegas. It might be Kira, because like that's another thing. Like I started bringing Kira because every single matchup I'm losing to, it's because the creatures aren't sticking, and I haven't played Kira since 2016 or something like that. It's been a long time since I packed up Kira, but there's a lot of removal in the format. So
yeah, I mean, there's like Modern Horizons printed 4 of the best removal spells in the format. All right, last one, and this is kind of the Titan decks, like Amulet Titan versus Scapeshift versus any of those.
Amulet Titan is just a terrible matchup. It's really bad, but I'm really happy that it's like sort of
gotten worse.
It hasn't disappeared from the metagame, but like it's receded a lot. It's got new enemies. It's got to deal with Unholy Heat. There's a good Blood Moon deck in the format with the Murktide deck. They're like and I think even the Crashing Footfall decks play some Blood Moons, some versions. So they've got some competition now. Amulet Titan can't, and also Mill just randomly being there. So they now have a bunch of random bad matchups, and that will keep. Not to say, like a lot of people are asking me, what happened to Amulet Titan? What happened? Amulet Titan is still a really powerful deck. It's got more problems than it did before. In the past, it was just you play a Primeval Titan and it resolves and it attacks. The game is basically over. But now it's got more than just Path to Exile it has to deal with. So yeah, it's not as invincible as it used to be.
It's not that it's not seeing play. It's more that it just is losing.
It's a win rate is not as high as it used to be. But it's still a powerful deck. Still very powerful.
And so I guess, we could keep going with different deck matchups. I guess, are there any decks that I missed that you want to kind of point out as key things that you have that might be good or bad against those decks, or key things to keep in mind for Merfolk players, and any decks that are expressly terrible as a matchup?
Well, I mean, the matchup I'm most concerned about is this sort of Yorian Elemental Soup deck that's playing with Solitude, Omnath, and Fury, because Solitude and Fury, I mean, they interact for free. Like, the greatest thing about a control is at some point they'll tap out for, say, a Planeswalker, I counter it, and then I just load the board up. Violent this, play this creature at instant speed, and then you can interact with me. But now they can do things like Solitude and still interact with me, or I start building up a team and then they Fury both of them away, and they operate with so much card advantage, it's like basically impossible to compete with. So subtlety might be the answer that I needed in those matchups. I just have to wait and see that. But that's basically the one matchup I'm terrified of for the most part. I'm not really concerned about the other matchups, whatever. Merfolk is like, it's like a 50-50 deck usually against a lot of archetypes. And then you just hope to know that you're 50% better than the other person. And that's what gives you your advantage. I would just say like that Elemental Soup deck that now is becoming very popular to the point like the Elemental deck doesn't see any play anymore. Like I thought it was one of the top 10 decks to beat, and now I don't think so. Like people are just gravitating to the new Yorian, basically 4-color control deck.
Sure, it's interesting that Subtlety has the chance of being this. Like for those who don't remember this, like when the Titans came out, everyone was really hyped on Primeval Titan and Inferno Titan and Grave Titan and like Sun Titan in non-standard formats, but like Commander and stuff. But like Frost Titan was like the dog. Everyone was like, oh, that card's bad. It's not going to see play. Like it like all these other ones do something. This just like and then it ended up that it was the one-shot bullet against the other Titans. It ended up being
History's repeating itself.
Yeah, where like everyone, I mean, I was guilty of this walking out of Modern Horizons, talking like, you know, my hot take was that Fury was great and Subtlety was bad, and that mostly panned out. But now we've gone to the point where like Subtlety might be the card needed to fight against the other
the other elementals.
It's the Frost Titan of this cycle, which is wild and cool in some ways, other than the fact that they're all like $80 price tags.
The Subtlety is a few bucks. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, you can get your Subtlety. I would get them now. I mean, based on this conversation, I do think that they're... I mean, I do want to talk about the elementals in general. So the elementals are a weird problem because you kind of can't get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many of them in some. Maybe you get rid of one of them. Maybe you, if they do become a problem. But how do you feel that these exist? I mean, obviously, two of them are pretty terrible for you. But yeah.
You know what? I like them.
Okay.
You know what? I'm gonna like them. You know, let's talk about what makes modern modern. What are like the foundations of modern? What would you say are some of the key differentiators of modern over other formats, or specifically standard?
Historically, like larger metagame, right? Like
yes.
More
diversity.
Diversity is a big one.
Very important.
The ability to pick a deck for a long term amount of time.
But I would put that in the metagame category.
Yeah.
We have a big metagame. That's why we can play our decks for forever, because hey, it can be relevant for a very, very long time.
Even if like you've had decks banned out from under you, like Affinity or Storm, those decks have like, there are artifact decks that are good now. You need Urza's, but a lot of the cards are still good in those decks, and there are Affinity decks that are playable now. You have same thing with Merfolk, right? Like and so, and like, you know, even if you had Splinter Twin, that was banned. I mean, the Collected Company path is my favorite one, right? They're like, Birthing Pod was the best deck. Birthing Pod went away. Within 2 months, Collected Company exists. The deck was like 90% the same cards. Just like upped the consistency of the combo pieces and lowered the one-shot bullets. And then that became the Devoted Druid deck, which then became the Heliod deck, which then became, you know, like it just like consistently there's been this black, white, red or black, white, green combo deck, creature deck that's existed in the format. And most of the expensive cards have rotated into the next one. And I think that's a big feature of Modern, is just being able to like pick a strategy and always be able to find a window into being able to be good at that strategy and have success in the format.
Yep.
Which
so
is
now
the
compared to
thing.
Say Legacy or Vintage, what makes Modern special? Why would you want to play Modern over Legacy and Vintage?
Vintage is, well, let's remove cost, I guess, from the perspective, because I do think that is obviously a big part of that. To be able to play Vintage, you could buy a car, maybe a few of them.
Buy a house. Yeah. Some of these decks are approaching $130,000.
Right. So outside of like in a world where we're proxying everything, I think that Vintage is, and I also, because I do think a big part of it is also that, and it's related to that, is community, right? Like you can go to a local game store and find Modern Night. You're just like finding there's one store in the city of Los Angeles that has Legacy Nights, and we are the second largest city in the country and top 10 in the world or whatever. So like, if we can't find Legacy games, it's hard to find them. But so outside of those two, like actually I can't play Legacy, which is the answer. There is speed, especially with Vintage. Like you're able to do stuff in the mid game that doesn't really exist in Vintage, outside of the jockeying of, oh, I'm not going to go for my thing until you go for it, but we're not really doing things until one turn. And then with Legacy, it's the removal is worse. I mean, without Force of Will and Wasteland, the format drops down to like the ability to play more creature removal, but then also have creatures that come into play.
But also Legacy is faster. You can still get like you can be toasted by turn 3, and that was a big thing. I think what people love about Modern is, for the most part, I mean, you even look at all those top 20 lists, so you look at how many of these can kill by turn 3.
Right.
And I would say Solitude actually helps defend like the turn 4 rule of Modern. So it might be free, it might be annoying, but it's still a 2-for-1. Maybe if Ephemerate doesn't exist, like there's no chance to like really abuse this card. But Solitude itself has actually slowed Modern down a lot. Like
Mhm.
a lot. I just don't see any. Like, I think probably Solitude is one of the reasons why Death Shadow isn't one of the bigger decks at the moment, because they could be all in on this one creature that at any moment, even when your opponent's tapped out, can be like, I mean, if you have Inquisition or whatever, the Inquisition doesn't even work.
Right.
It's got to be Thoughtseize now. So I think both Fury and Solitude, while they're really annoying, and they are very good against me for the most part, they're actually slowing down and making Modern really interactive. Amulet Titan can't get away with, murder. Death Shadow can't get away with murder. Mono Red Prowess can't get away with murder. Like, whatever early game that you have. And it's not like aggro is impossible, because Hammer Time exists. So this is the fastest deck in the format. And then so, the aggro decks, they still have an angle. It's not going to be ships passing in the night anymore.
Right. That's kind of like, and people always talked about Force Will being printed Modern, and we were pretty pro it before the previous season for MH2 happened, just from the perspective of like, Modern had gone so fast. The power level of Modern Horizons 1 plus Eldraine plus War of the Spark, etc., had like upped the combo potential of the format and really made it so like, oh no, this is a turn 2, turn 3 format now. We finally left. And I agree. I think the Elementals have done a really good job at slowing the format down. And the other key pieces, Ragavan, Murktide Regent, are tempo control pieces. Like, they just printed good Delver of Secrets. Delver of Secrets has been bad for a very long time. And in Modern, in a world without Ponder and Preordain, and Wasteland, and
Force of Will,
and Days,
and Days,
but it's like a blue-red tempo deck is a thing I think people want to have in the format. It sucks that it's attached to the new Tarmogoyf as far as pricing people out of the format, but like Splinter Twin was a tempo deck that just like won because it also had a combo in it. But like, I think the thing that people were sad when it left is because that blue-red tempo deck didn't exist and hasn't really existed since then. I am, of all of the decks that we talk about, like have like the Birthing Pod speech I just went through a second ago, blue-red tempo has been the one that kind of got hit the hardest, and Grixis Death Shadow kind of took over that mantle. But the blue-red deck became Blood Moon. The blue-red deck, or Blue Moon decks. The blue-red deck then became Phoenix decks, which weren't really tempo. They were dredge combo that like had like pretend tempo elements to it. But now with Grixis Death Shadow and going into the blue-red deck, I think like you're just in, that's the new Delver of Secrets. And I think that is also beneficial. I think a format is healthy when you have a tempo control deck be one of the main viable archetypes.
So there's a lot of, like, the way I look at, like, I'm not in love with Solitude or Fury as cards, but if we take a step back and we look at the metagame, it's still a diverse metagame, and we can't expect every deck at the top to stay there for forever. Like, things got to move. Like, the new cards, and we had a lot of new cards over the last 2 years, and I think now finally after Modern Horizons 2, I think I was against the soft rotation argument, but now after Modern Horizons 2, like, I don't recognize any of these decks, more or less. Just burn, maybe Blue-White Control, and then some resemblance of Jund, and that's the only things that are here that I remember from like 6 years ago.
Well, like Orzhov Stoneblade was a deck that existed that people would play. Titan decks have been around this whole time.
Only when they unbanned Stoneforge Mystic.
Well, sure, yes, but that's not for Modern Horizons 2.
Well, I'm just saying from the last 2 years, this injection of cards has now changed a lot of stuff. But Stoneblade saw a lot of play, and so I mean, it's still modern. It's still diverse. We still hit turn 4. Despite all these new cards that have been printed, I think Modern still has the flavor that it has always had.
Sure. Well, and I do want to say that I think some of this is also a stratification of Modern having become an online format until very recently. So, and we talked about this a lot last week, but if you look at the results from SCG Con's 2 Modern tournaments, there was an invitational and then there was a open. And then the top 8s of both tournaments, I think it's the top 16s they had recorded, drastically different. And the main reason for that is GP metagames aren't people paying it. They're not mostly pros that have access to any card they could ever want, right? Like if I'm a pro player and I'm playing Pro Magic, I pretty much could play whatever deck I wanted because I have the connections to be able to borrow the cards I need, or I own them. And if I'm online, I have a MTG, a Mana Traders account, and I can rent any card I want.
Yes.
And as long as it's not like the weird moments right after a Modern Horizons set come out and just the card availability is tanked, you can pretty much play any deck you want to get into.
Just remember though that at least for SCG Con, it was a split format. So there's a lot of weird modern decks into the top 8.
Sure.
Only
true.
because someone's standard performance was really good. And so, going into GP Vegas, this will be the first real test to see what cream does rise to the top in a 1,000 to 2,000 player event.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I'm most excited by this weekend. And one of the reasons that we're working with Corbin Hostler, who does tournament coverage when GPs were happening, to actually, sponsor the tournament coverage of this event to make sure it still happened, because we wanted to see, what does this look like? What is the modern meta game happening? What cool decks can we find on the floor? I guess for the people watching, if you want to see all of that, make sure to hit subscribe, because we're going to have video of interviews posted here. Make sure to follow the Masters of Modern Twitter account at the MMcast, because we're going to be posting coverage throughout the weekend, specifically on Twitter. And so make sure to follow both places. We're going to have a bunch of content that weekend, which is going to be fun. But yeah, to your point, the one thing I will say, yes, it was a multi-format thing, but the invitational metagame was basically this list, right? It was like Hammer Time decks, Loro decks, Kahiro decks. It was like 3 different. It was just like what you would expected from the metagame if you were to go MTG Goldfish and look up what the best decks are. But you went to the open event and Mill won a thing. There was a Time Warp Rug deck that top 16. There was just such a different look of the format, and part of that is because those are the cards people own. The real world is different than when any card is available to you, because this is a TCG. But that also means that the metagames get very, very different looking, and also which decks are good in those metagames change. And I'm this is a very condensed version of what a modern tournament could look like, and I do think Magic Vegas is going to be a much different look.
Yeah. So, I think. So well, first off, you nail it perfectly that the Mana Traders accounts, the rental services, these things are creating a very different metagame online, and as they get more and more popular, no one's dedicated to their deck, whereas in paper they have to be dedicated to it. But I would expect at least day 2, or at least the top. If I were to predict the top 150 decks, it would probably look closer to what we see in the top 32s of modern challenges or preliminaries and stuff like that. But day 1, it will still be anything,
right?
Because not everyone's going to own these cards, not everyone can borrow the cards. Not to mention, hey, maybe it's even worse. The cards are legitimately more expensive now. These decks are really expensive. Just looking they're averaging $1,300 or something like that. The price of these decks are really up there, especially for the really good decks. So maybe people are really going to be priced out of these things.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that can look like, and that I think is my biggest complaint with the soft rotation modern problem, right? Is it's just can you keep up with these prices? If I didn't buy my elemental cycles during Modern Horizons 2, one down moment right after it came out, now it's an entire standard deck or an entire deck in another format just to buy a playset of these cards. We did do so anyone joining new, for the last 5 weeks now, we've been doing kind of a key point to kind of create a list of how to get into modern, and we have episodes on what cards you should buy, but a big one was how to get into modern. We did it with the professor on what are the best ways to enter the format from an affordability perspective. Definitely recommend checking that out if you want to see what that looks like. Ironically, I'm just trying to hit up the best Merfolk players in the world within a month. I had
just by coincidence.
Yeah, I was oh wait, I've now had I needed to end it with you, right? You're the one that's built everything on that, that pyramid, and are the most actually doing tournament magic with that deck. So ending the cycle of Prof into Corbin into you of Merfolk aficionados was exciting.
Corbin Hostler too, yeah. He's a big into Merfolk as well.
Yep, I all 3 of them are the ones that love when I bring up the fact that Merfolk has tied for the most modern GP wins, right? They're oh yeah, you're right. I'm playing a deck that's has won a lot of things. I'm so used to people being mean to me.
Proof of concept.
Yeah, exactly. So all right, so this is the last bit. So we asked our Discord. You can also do it in that Discord. Some questions for you, and some of it I think we maybe talked a little bit, but I'll jump to it and we can answer some of them. So Bolt Snap Bolt asks, what cards, if any, would you want taken out of the format?
I just want, it would be nice if Luris was gone. Just specifically Luris. I could at least, because it's turned these Thoughtseize matchups into like a ticking time bomb. I know I can't go into the late game against this, so I have to not so much race. I have to tempo them out. I got to choke up their mana. I'm playing on an angle that I don't really want to. Like I'll play this angle, but I've warped my deck so much. Like as far as I'm concerned, Dismember is unplayable. Like I wouldn't even want to play any sort of removal spell in my deck unless it was Prismatic Ending for exactly exiling the spell, so Luris can't bring it back. Luris is, I mean, you could say that about all the other companions as well. Like it's all card advantage, but Luris is back-breaking card advantage in an Inquisition removal heavy deck where they just exchange all the resources and get the Luris. Okay, this game is basically over. You have like a 1-turn window to kill Luris, or they'll just bring everything back from the graveyard, and you just can't come back from that. So that's probably the only card I would prefer to not see anymore, or they just change the companion rule and say, I don't know, something else. I have no idea what they can do.
Would you so you just ban Luros outright, like, because I know people have talked about getting rid of
the easy way to deal with this stupid kitty.
just finally put the, like, we've tried, it's still too good. Yeah, because I don't know if like Kihira in control deck seems almost like a freebie that they're like, oh, we'll sacrifice like the 2 Snapcaster mages we maybe would have played just to be able to play this. Elementals is a tribal deck, so like that just feels like it belongs there. The Yorion problem, I think, is the other one, but like that one also just like wasn't seeing play 3 weeks ago, so it's hard to say that's like the one that's problematic.
So Kihira is a free 8th card, but I don't know why people don't talk about this more. Luris is a free 8th, 9th, 10th card.
Right.
Like that's my problem with Luris, and it's not bringing back chunky stuff. No, it's bring back 1-drops and 2-drops. Like, if these are really easy things to cast, if you have 3 mana to put Luris in your hand, you generally have a 4th one to just immediately play a creature from the graveyard. So Kihira is just a random 8th card. But I would say Luris cascades or spirals out of control worse than Ragavan does. Because the moment someone plays Luris is when they know the coast is clear and the game just so basically ends there. Whereas with Ragavan, it's played turn 1, but like, hey, we got a game. I can try to block it, I can kill it. There's a lot of this, still a lot of Magic to be played, but every single time Luris gets played against me, it's almost always when I'm doomed. Or at least if I try to play an attrition war with another Luris deck. So I've learned I just can't do it. I mean, hey, maybe that's just how Magic needs to be played. I got to take a more tempo-oriented role, or I'm bouncing the stuff to my opponent's hand, or stealing it from them. But anyway, that's my gripe with Luris. It's radically changed my approach to some matchups that used to be really easy.
And like, so like over Ragavan, over Dragon Rage Channeler, over Murktide Regent, over any of the elementals, like Luros seems to be the card that I think I agree with you, that appears to have been the most consistent problem throughout the last 2 years.
And still sees a lot of play. Lot of play. I mean, it's still seeing a lot of play.
I will say it's good that they've gone the companion. I don't think erratating companions to make them worse makes sense to me, because it's like there's one that's really problematic. The other ones are seeing some amount of play. It's fine for some mechanic to play that way, but right now it's definitely not keeping like Luros in check. And if you do look at the Invitational, it was mono companion decks. It was like one deck that wasn't running companions. It was 3 Kihira decks and 4 Luris decks. And it was like, okay, this is maybe not good.
I mean, even in the Sunday Modern Challenge I just analyzed a little while ago, and maybe I should analyze more Modern Challenges, it was like 65 or 70% of the decks were all companion decks.
Right.
And I didn't even take notice to it until someone asked me about the companions. Like, oh, wow, there's a lot of companions. And we got Gigantha here and Obosh. Like any deck that can possibly play it, they are.
Right. And it's just like it has consistently been this really powerful mistake, like in the long run. And it sucks because I like in Commander, I have a few decks that are running companions, and I love them. In that format, they're great, and it's really cool that I get 3 of them. But in Modern, they've just, and in competitive Magic, they've been a disaster.
Well, I have a really bad take for this. Like, it's not a popular take. I like companions. I don't like that not everyone has access to one.
Sure.
That's my problem. Like, if we're horribly like in Commander, everyone has a commander, so it's a fair playing field. Like, imagine someone at the table that wasn't allowed to play with a commander and just had to play off the top of their deck. They would be horribly disadvantaged. I mean, they would just be ruined. Without like this, commander is an amazing resource. It's a recurable card that comes over and over and over again, despite removal spells. So I think Modern would be more fair. And I had no problem with companions just as a mechanic. I know I'm part of some weird 5% here. As you hear, I don't care what happens to Modern for the most part, so long as it's balanced. Whatever happens. That's the metagame that we have to. That's the new problems, new challenges. That's what I like about Modern. It's always changing. But I have to say, it's very unfair if certain decks are allowed to play with companions. Because I don't think a whole lot of new decks were made. Just some decks were just gutted so that they could jam a Lurrus in it, and then boom, you've got like a new companion. Like, these control decks are just adding a bunch of more cards to play Yorion. Burn just adds Lurrus to their sideboard, not changing anything else about their deck.
Right.
But anyway, that's just how it is.
Well, I think like we made this argument in the heyday of Companion, right? That like because errating them didn't sound feasible, and that was ended up being the solution, but we didn't think that like recommending they should change the rules on cards that are in print, because they'd never really done that in that way before as a response to banning, and like banning 10 cards seemed ridiculous or really difficult. And then you get into Vintage where you can't even do that, and they had to actually ban a card for the first time since your Charizard. Was in the format.
No, it was completely free.
But
one Black Lotus into Lurrus.
Right. But our answer to it was, if we're stuck with these, print more of them. Like just and kind of the irony of that, or not irony, that's not the right use of the word irony, but we went to Commander Legends, because at the time partners had a similar kind of reaction in Commander, where they were pretty behated because the only ones available were the first 15 that were printed, all relatively limited, a lot of them super powerful, forcing you pretty much to most of the time play a 4-color deck with them, or allowing 4-color decks to be a lot easier. And you had this problem where you're drawing an extra card at the beginning. Then Commander Legends came out, they printed 30 of them. Now, there's a ton of different strategies that can take advantage of them. The power level of them is all over the place. Every type of deck can use them. You don't need to use them. They're not necessarily better than playing other decks. And now they're people's favorite mechanic. I want more of them.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, so I have this take on Companion. I like Companion, but I have a feeling we're not going to see anymore, because it sounded like 95%. And they didn't come out with any more.
Right.
Since then. So maybe they did have plans. They're like, you know what? We got to scrap this. This is a really dangerous mechanic for Modern. But I would prefer to see more. But they're just not going to do it. So it looks like if they don't print too many, then one day these are all going to get banned.
Yeah, I can imagine Lurrus getting banned. I could also imagine them once in a while. I could see them doing a Merfolk Companion tomorrow. I could imagine they're just
Modern Horizons 3 Companion.
Yeah,
Merfolk.
There's one the same way they did a Merfolk God, right? There's just gonna be one random Merfolk Companion, or maybe 2, and it's a hark back to the fact that mechanic was used before, in the same way random cards have that in Modern Horizons, and we get and that's an easy one, right? People are oh, I can't think of a lot of cool ideas, and the easy one is just a tribal one, just every card in your deck has to be a Merfolk that's a creature. And that's a companion.
Elemental.
Exactly. And that they could do for days. And so I could see us going to a tribal set and maybe getting a cycle. That's another place I could see it. But I agree that either it needs to be dealt with, or a solution might be print a bunch of them. But they'd have to commit to that, and it's a big risk.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a difficult thing for them to do. It's a huge risk. And maybe they make things worse, and now they got to ban 20 cards instead of just ban 10.
Right. Yeah, based on what we're seeing, I think this weekend's also going to show a lot about, and maybe Wizards is kind of waiting for the same thing where they're like, let's see what a real paper tournament looks like with actual active participants, and like, do we need to do something? And they might see that window. It has been nice though since Modern Horizons 2 that there has been this stabilization and there hasn't been bans. I'm glad they didn't like ban Urza Saga out of the gate or Ragavan out of the gate or like even Luros at this point. But I think we are getting to the point where seeing one of these cards go is becoming more and more likely as it just is gutting decks. Like there's cards that don't see play anymore because just Luros is around, and why play a 3-drop? There was an argument back in the day that that's why they banned Splinter Twin. Was like, we had Tom Lapille on the episode and he was like, here's the issue. You can't play a 3-drop that's a sorcery in Modern anymore because Splinter Twin exists in the format. And Aaron Forsythe is going to go in his office. He's going to be sad and walk out. I'm like, I guess we have to bring Splinter Twin. And like 3 days later, banned it. It's
they axed the damn thing.
It was like, oh, Tom Lapille just like totally predicted what was going to happen. So that's great. So yeah, it's definitely a thing that I can imagine happening. And then we'll have 10 years of people wanting to bring Luros back because you'll have nice.
Maybe. I don't know if there's a devoted fan base for Luris as there was for Splinter Twin.
Yeah, I think Luris is a card that is going to be one of those like, yes, thank you. It'll be not like Hogak levels because that was like an emergency ban, but
there'll be a Gitaxian probe.
Yeah.
Like, thank you for your time while we were together.
Right, exactly.
Time to move on.
All right, so
time to see other people.
This is from Van Gogh. Where do you see the room for Merfolk to evolve to? We kind of answered some of this, but the last question is the one I want to get to mostly because the current decks that pop up in challenges seem to have a very robust core with limited wiggle room to pivot in other directions. Can you see green or white or other splashes work its way back into the deck, or is the core too settled in the current meta?
Well, I don't really like the green because I cannot. What I loved about green, Commander Speaker, Merfolk Mistbinder, is that you had a lot of power at a low mana cost, but now because of Fury and Solitude, it just doesn't matter. It like really does. You will never get under. Merfolk wasn't fast to begin with, and now it's like it looks really slow in the face of these free interactive removal spells. So I'm not even considering the green at all. White maybe has a really solid chance because of Prismatic Ending. And I can favorably play it with Chalice of the Void, maybe if I want to. But even without it, like, it's just well positioned. That's why it's one of the best removal spells in the format. Deals with Ragavan, Dragon Rage Chandler very cleanly. Luris can't bring it back. So, I mean, maybe there's room to play a white splash specifically for Prismatic Ending, because it's a removal spell that maybe Merfolk actually wants. And actually will remove things, and it's gone forever.
It's the most played card in the format for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
What about red or black?
We've got nothing for black. There's like this. I don't know. Maybe there's not nothing. Maybe there's something to explore there, but it's nothing useful. Like you think black, you think Fatal Push, you think I don't know Blood Chiefs. There's Inquisition, Thoughtseize, but that's now you're playing into everyone else's hand. Like Yorion is a card. Most of these Yorion decks, they're card advantage machines. So you're never going to really grind them out with Thoughtseize. And I don't want to. And also destroying creatures plays into Luris, so I'm not really looking at that. The advantages to red, I've played it before. Bolt is nice. Just randomly throw Bolt at your opponent. Sometimes that makes combat damage a lot easier. And having access to Blood Moon is sometimes convenient. Some decks just lose to Blood Moon, and that's just it's literally sort of a 1-card win condition sometimes. But that's about it. Outside of that, I'm not really looking at the other colors. I would say white is the most possible. But still, like, whenever you move into another color, you're immediately weaker to Blood Moon. Like, when you're mono blue, you crush all the Blood Moon decks. Sometimes they bring it in against you because of Mutavault. They are fools. They usually mana screw themselves. So, like, I'm all in favor of anyone bringing in Blood Moon against me. But the problem is when you start splashing a color, you now realistically can lose to a Blood Moon, because if you might end up just being dependent on Aether Vial or something, or it really chokes up your mana.
So many of your cards are double pips too, right? Like,
yeah,
like
exactly.
If you get off of, if you're just like, oh, island red blue land that is now permanently red, I just can't cast spells. Cool.
Exactly.
And then the last question is from Nana Rhodes. Strongest card for Modern Horizon 2, and if there were a Modern Horizons block constructed, which deck would you play?
Probably some elemental deck. I get to play with all the. I think. That includes Modern Horizons 1?
Yeah, so you get Modern Horizons 1 and Modern Horizons 2.
It probably has to be some sort of elemental Uro deck, or maybe not Uro. Something with Ephemerate. That's probably the best. That's probably the best deck in some block. It's very interesting to think about block constructed. Best card out of Modern Horizons 2. Like maybe it's Dragon Rage Channeler. I mean, maybe it's that. Maybe it's a close between maybe Dragon Rage Channeler, Ragavan, and Solitude. Those are all very.
Urza Saga maybe is the fourth if you're picking a top 4.
I mean, Urza Saga is the greatest chance of being completely busted in half, but no one's found the deck yet. So I mean, that could easily be number 1. But there's been a lot of cute decks with Urza Saga. People are just randomly throwing it in like in Jun. So I mean, that does show the power level of Urza Saga.
Like Hammer Time decks, right? That's like probably the best deck for it too. And then you have
yeah.
Oh, and
for sure, absolutely.
Prismatic Ending, I guess, is the 5th.
Prismatic Ending.
Top 5. So Prismatic Ending's not Subtlety, the white one.
But like something like Ragavan or Dragon Rage Channeler. Like once they come out early, you could potentially just lose to them. Urza Saga, you really depend on interacting with your opponent in some way in order to like get like full value out of this. If you just play Urza Saga and try to make some constructs, you'll probably lose to your opponent. But I would say Urza Saga has the highest ceiling because it is a tutor. As more artifacts come out, this could end up one day being above and beyond the best card printed in Modern Horizons 2. But just after a few months, probably Dragon Rage Channeler or something like that.
Sure. All right. That
or maybe Ragavan. I don't know. There's a debate. I want to say it's Ragavan, but a lot of people make a good argument. Dragon Rage Channeler is an amazing card too. Sculpts the top of your library better than it steals cards from your opponent's deck, like Ragavan does.
I think I'm hard on Prismatic Ending, but I think like all 5 of these cards are like really good arguments. I think the elemental problem is that if there was only one of them, it would be a good argument, but because there's 5 and all of them are seeing play. It's hard.
What I loved about Prismatic, I made a whole spoiler video about Prismatic Ending. I thought this was above and beyond like one of the most amazing removal spells ever. It probably just is the best removal spell ever. And everyone just crapped on me in the comments section. Like, this thing's overrated. There's no way this is replacing Path to Exile. I should look up all these comments and like shame them in a future video. Like, no, I mean, maybe I was totally wrong about Thrasta because I was like really pumping up Thrasta. It's like I kept this video up too, just because it keeps gaining views. People are, I guess, looking at the open Thrasta in a Modern Horizons 2 booster and like, I gotta look up like who's talking about this. Well, I talked about it, but anyway, it sees no play. But I was dead on about Prismatic Ending. That was a completely format changing card for sure.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, if you want to say it's number 1, I mean, I'm not really going to debate it.
Sure. But I think it's a fun. I think there's a bunch of different arguments, and that one can fall to the wayside, right? Like if white removal is better in other places, but yeah, people are splashing for it. It's an interesting conversation. And then I guess those are the last of the questions. If you have, is there anything else you want to talk about in regards to Modern before sign-offs?
Oh my God, there's a million things. We should talk more about Modern, less about Merfolk. Who wants to hear about Merfolk?
Well, surprisingly large number of people. So
interesting.
But awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, anytime you want to come back on, it was great having you. Really quickly, once again, where can people find you on the internet?
Anywhere, Nikachu MTG. Nikachu MTG. Twitter. Not that I post anything useful there. YouTube. I mean, YouTube's the real baby. I have like 3 different channels now. Like a main channel. Almost like video essays and reacts now is basically what that channel is. And then I have a new channel, actually, Nikachu MTG News, where I try to put more my Modern devoted content there. And then I have Nikachu MTG Streams, where you can see my gameplay, and I have my own like morning show where I do Q&A and we talk Modern. Basically Modern. I mean, the community is very Modern based. Sometimes someone asks something about Pauper, and I think I had Commander players there until they realized I don't know anything about Commander. They went to some other show probably to get their answers.
Yeah, you got to get those commander questions out there. Like companions are good there, but terrible everywhere else. in for the format, not in quality of the card. It's the opposite problem. But so once again, thank you so much for joining. For if you're listening to this for the first time and you want more modern content, we release this podcast every Tuesday now. Please hit that subscribe button. It's super appreciated. We have a Discord and all that stuff that like all these questions. If you want to ask questions to our guests or us, we post what that episode is going to be and we hit up the questions when we have time. So definitely check out the Discord and make sure to stay tuned. Every Sunday we're doing modern gameplay now, live streamed. It'll be on twitch.tv/Kess Wiley and live stream to this YouTube channel. So either one, make sure to check it out, and then it'll be posted and live on the YouTube channel indefinitely. So if you missed this week's episode of me and Ben playing, I think I'm going to try making a time sieve deck of some variety work. Make sure to check that video out. Make sure to follow Nikachu. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. It was great having you on, and we'll be back. Oh, and last but not least, make sure to keep an eye out for the Magic Fest Vegas or whatever.
Yes.
Magic the Gathering Las Vegas. We'll have a bunch of coverage here and on the MMcast Twitter, and so it's going to be a big deal for the next week. We're super hyped to see what the metagame looks like, and hopefully Merfolk can top 8 another one.
For the professor has that extra incentive.
Oh,
if I win
that's
this
right.
tournament, I get a business class trip to his studio for a video. So I am technically playing for more prizes than anyone else in this room.
Yeah, no, it's fair. You get he mentioned that on the podcast before, and that's true of anyone playing Merfolk. So if you
not just me,
if you top 8 the tournament with a Merfolk deck, the professor will fly you to Portland to do a whole video about it. So definitely.
No, he said we have to win. We have to win.
You have to win. You have to win the whole one. I thought, okay, I'll take win. Yeah, you have to win the whole thing. I'm not going to promise anything. I don't have any stake in it. All right. So once again, thank you everyone watching. Hit that like button, subscribe button, watch all the other videos on all the content, etc. And we will talk to you next week.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.